Hey everybody, and welcome to the Indie Hour. If you're not familiar with this show, this is a weekly show where the patrons pick a game they are excited about from a poll, long list of games, some of which they've suggested, some of which I've plucked from the internet, and we pair it with a similarly themed game so that you could use like your same model collection, terrain set, table size, whatever it ends up being, and have a cool extra set of rules for a collection you might already have. And of course, to shine a spotlight on cool games. Now, of course, this week's game is near and dear to a theme of my favorite sort of like genre, and it's the zombie apocalypse. We are talking about County Road Z today, which was picked by patrons as a sort of feature for this week's Indie Hour, and which I have paired with an absolute classic, almost 20 years old now. It is a 2-hour war games feature, all things zombie, and this is the Fade to Black edition, which is a sort of like almost like a what's the word? A star power movie version of a miniature game, and uses some sort of like older school kind of mechanics. Now, this is the Modifius version of County Road Z, originally self-published by Jordan Heckman. This version has been lovingly laid out by the team at Modifius with cool art and design and layout, and is sort of his ultimate edition of his game, available through Drive-Thru RPG. So let's dive in right now. And what we usually do in the format for this type of a feature is we'll go through the game, talk about the core mechanics, talk about what places it firmly in the genre. I'll mention some key features that I like, and then we'll go to the chat and take some comments and questions from them about that game, and then take a little break, jump into the second paired game. And at the end, I will talk about my game in this over, because the patrons will get mad at me if I don't plug a little bit of my own stuff, and I'm very bad at doing it, but I did also write a zombie game called Last Days, and published it through Osprey back in 2018. So let's talk about some County Road Z. What do we got going on here? So again, this is a drive-through RPG, but you can also get physical rulebooks from Modifius edition of the game. It is a game of rural zombie apocalypse. So the idea here is that you're typically playing out in the country, and it features small groups of survivors doing everything you would expect to see in a zombie apocalypse. You can see it's got some great art, lovely cover, and features sort of a my closest analog is a video game called State of Decay. I love the State of Decay. It was originally like an Xbox Live Arcade game. But if you're looking for like, if you're a video game player and you want to know kind of like the way this game feels to play, State of Decay would be kind of the closest analog. You have your key sort of like leader survivors. They all have different tiers that they can be at. The more heroic your tier is, the better you are at doing things and your skill tests and stuff like that. And then you build your base in your community. And it's sort of a two-factor sort of game. There's managing your community and there's managing your people. And there's also some sort of like different like ways of theming the game around it too. So about 180 pages. You can see there's, it starts at my favorite way of starting a rulebook, which is start with your collect and build part, which is making your characters and your survivors. Then the community layer. So what does the missions look like? How do the maintenance of your like community sort of work out after in the post-game sequence? And then how to set up and play a game. All the additional stuff like equipment and vehicles, building up your base and making it bigger, standard story missions. And they all have a way of theming them. So they can either be a viral apocalypse, which is sort of like the typical way that a zombie apocalypse happens, but also versions for cosmic horror, and magic apocalypse too. So if you want to have a more like sort of weird themed zombie apocalypse, there's stuff for that in here as well. And then finally, you have the Apocalypse Toolkit. And the Apocalypse Toolkit is like ways of adding additional layers of complexity, themes, and little MacGuffins to the game to tweak it to the kind of zombie apocalypse you want it to be. So if you want it to be more of like a classic Romero zombie experience, slow zombies, then that's like the basic core mechanics of the game. If you wanted to add on, let's say like different kinds of zombies, like a Left 4 Dead style, bloaters, tanks, you could add that from like the toolkit or the Origins of the Rot stuff. If you wanted to make it more of a Alan Wake style zombie apocalypse, right? You might make it a cosmic horror one. It's allowing you to kind of theme the game outside of what sort of like the original tropes are and make it a little bit different. All right, introduction. Welcome to Flyover Country. So again, the State of Decay thing is very much, or even Dead Rising, where like you're out in the towns, where you're in the Willamette Valley. It has that feeling of this is a rural apocalypse, right? This is middle America and what happens when the dead begin to rise. Game basics. What do you need to play? It's a D10 based game. You need some zombie miniatures. You need a 30 by 30 table, some 25 mil tokens to represent things like your scavenge markers, your little supply markers and stuff like that. Trap tokens, which could be some wired up grenades or like a little Molotov cocktail that you got like on a trip line or something like that. And then terrain itself, it does recommend you want to have some buildings that you can go inside of and broken down vehicles, which you could use to make your escape and stuff. There's some sort of convenient, the D10 is a really handy RNG for these types of miniature games because you can also use it for scatter because the top's a point, right? So for doing radiant rolls, you'll roll a D10 and add 3. That's the way you do scatter. So the point of the D10 says the direction you're going, and then you roll the dice number plus 3 for the distance. And a placement roll is a D10 times 3 up and down on the X and Y axis. So if you need to do like a grid coordinate, right, you'd roll the first D3 and you get a 3, it's 9 inches. So it'd be 9 inches over. And then if you rolled a 5, it would be 15 inches down onto the table. And that's why the 30 by 30 works so well, right? So you're in front of a 30 by 30 table. It does mean there's a blind spot of a 3-inch square in the bottom, but that's not a huge problem. All right, turns, rounds, and layers. So when you play a game, there's going to be campaign terms. It's about a week in the life of your community. And then there's the layers inside of that. So there's the mission layer, which is like what you actually go out and do during the game. And there's the managing your community layer, which is like the progress of like people recovering from past injuries, stuff going on inside, feeding everybody, making sure there's enough beds for everybody to sleep in. And then there could be like the general unrest of your community too. A bit about the apocalypse toolkit. It's the different like viral apocalypse, a microscopic virus, a cosmic horror, which turns people into zombies, and then magical apocalypse, where like the barrier between reality separates and the dead start to rise. It's very, the magical apocalypse is how I would do like Army of Darkness, right? With like Deadites. Cosmic horror would be more like weird tentacle monsters from beyond the stars. So sort of like, what was that great movie called? The Void, right? Where they're all holed up in the hospital. And then viral apocalypse could be more like 28 days later with like fast zombies and stuff like that too. Characters and communities. So survivor tiers, again, you can almost, if you want to take examples of like great zombie media, like The Walking Dead, or you want to take things like 28 Days Later, or The Night of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, like the Romero trilogy, even Shaun of the Dead, you're going to find some parallels in here. And that's one of the first things that I like about this like game in particular is it classes all the heroes in a way where they fit the sort of like familiar faces of the media we've consumed in this genre. So first you have heroes. They're the stars of the show. The apocalypse of the movie, these survivors would be top billing. So your Cillian Murphys, your Ricks, your Michonnes, and there's only one hero can be present in any mission, although up to 3 heroes can be part of your community. Depending on the tier of your hero, that's at your base. Heroes will begin with 1 stat at 4, 1 at 3, 1 at 2, and 1 at 1. So this is an assigned stat game, a little bit like playing Forbidden Psalm, where you get like a pool of stats, then you plug them in. There's 4 stats in this game. Each stat has a skill tree underneath it. And depending upon the rank of your hero, the tier of your hero, you get a higher number that you can assign to each of those stats. There's some examples later on that you get to see. Leaders. So leaders would be like the like sub, like if we're going to use Walking Dead as an example here again, like the sub characters, like the Daryls, you know what I mean? Or the Michonne in that case too, like these sort of like dependable sort of like, reliable people that can lead a small group, but they don't necessarily lead the community as a whole. Citizens, they're the average Joes, and then rookies, which are the nobodies and up-and-comers in a community. A lot of survivors can start as rookies, and you can find them out and have them like appear as strangers during the game. It also determines how many skills you have. So for instance, a hero, like I said, has a 4, 3, 2, and a 1 for a stat. Leaders have a 3, 2, 1, and a 0. Citizens have a 2, a 1, and 2 zeros. And then rookies have a 1 and 3 zeros. Leaders have 4 skills, right? Things that they're good at. And those skill trees could be a bunch of different weapons. So like the blunt skill would allow you to use a bunch of different blunt class weapons. Guns, same thing. Tactics, same thing. Whereas down to like a basic rookie would only have a single one. And then we got our survivor stats. So again, each stat is what you're going to add to a D10 roll to try and hit a target number. And then also what associated skills with them will be applied to playing the game. So for strength, blunt weapons, bladed weapons, heavy weapons, carry. So how much you can actually like physically have on your body, your carrying slots. That could include like picking up other survivors and stuff too, and supply tokens. And then breaking. So like, how do you kick in doors? I do like that, like there's so much barricaded in this world that break is actually a skill. Dexterity would be handguns, long guns, archery, stealth, and enter. So like how do you like lockpick and stuff like that? break into cars. Intelligence is things like scavenge, scout, tactics, tinker, and traps, so like wiring up grenades or even like taking them down. Tinker could be things like breaking into or building like a cool like Dead Rising style weapon. And then cooperation is things like medicine, rationing, mechanics, teaching, and utilities. A lot of like the back at the base stuff, but mechanics can be used to like hotwire a car, and utilities can be used to interact with objectives and stuff too. And then skills and stores. Skill levels start from 0 to 4 with a maximum skill equal to the tier. Skills all start at 0, and the skill level is added to the skill's governing stat and any equipment modifiers. So if you were like a heavy, like your raw stat, like let's say if you were strength 4 and you were using a heavy weapon, you'd add 4 to the roll, but your skill you still can go up and then add additional points that make you even better at fighting off of your base stat. So like think of your stats as your raw talent at something, but you can still improve the individual skills to make them better. It reminds me a little bit of Advanced Fighting Fantasy, where you have a base skill stat, and your skill stat would be relatively low, it'd be like 7 or 8, but then you'd have sub skills and your stat in that skill would add to your base skill. Kind of like proficiency in D&D is like your raw ability to do everything, but then having a skill, you get your skill plus your proficiency. So an example here is like if your heavy skill is level 2, your stat is going to be at 3, and then your -1 is your item is -1. You'd be at a total of 4. So you would so if you're -1 hit because your item's like a heavy weird weapon, it has a penalty to hit with, but your level's 2. You add your level, then your stat, then the net from the item. Your score is 4 that you're adding to your tests. And then different types of rolls. So static skills and skill rolls. Some skills require a roll when used. This is called a skill check. When you do it, you roll a d10 and add your relevant skill score. At the end, you determine the result. If it's after the target number, then you succeed. The common skills: move. The score determines how many inches a model can move during one action. Defense determines the number required for an attack to succeed against that model. A detection is the target for stealth checks made to prevent zombies from activation during a move action. All survivors start with a move score of 6 and a defense score of 6. Like no matter what your actual class is, you have that as your beginning. Zombies have their own individual scores because they're different from survivors and strangers. Now, noise is a radiant number in parentheses, and every action will have a noise stat. So move, for instance, has a noise stat of 6. That's the distance that passive zombies can be activated inside if you move through them. And it's a radius around you. So all the way along your path when you move, you have to check 6-inch sort of like control radius, kind of like an infinity. And anything that passes inside that would have to make a detection test to see if they would find you or not. And then they would get to react. So a little bit like Infinity, there's an action-reaction mechanic in this game where whenever you do something, if something's inside your noise range that's either active or passive, they'll get to react to you. So like a passive zombie, it would always just, if it detects you, become active. And then an active zombie could do things like run towards you and try and charge into combat with you if it detects you. We got definitions of all the skills here. So like strength skills, all the blunt weapons and stuff. They have got special rules where like they'll knock you back. Bladed weapons can pierce. A survivor with this skill always has access to shoddy -1 blade weapons. Basically, the idea is that like you're always be able to make a shank if you have this skill. They have a blunt weapons would have a 4-inch radius for noise. Like if you hit someone with a hammer, like it makes some noise. Bladed weapons have T instead. The T is a determinate skill. And then heavy weapons are 4. Carry is the combination of your strength of arms. It allows the user to equip a backpack, but does not require one. Survivors add their carry score to their number of inventory slots. So you have a basic one plus your carry score. Again, it's a little bit like Forbidden Song, right? Where your carry is, I think it's equal to it's 5 plus your strength. So if you have a -2 strength, like it would be 3. If you have positive strength, it'd be like 6, 7, or 8 for items. Break is very loud. It's like smashing windows or knocking in doors. Handguns. The handgun skill requires grants the survivor the ability to equip pistols and revolvers. Pistols jam on a range attack of 1. A jam pistol requires an action to clear. Revolvers don't jam, but can't be used to attack twice in a single activation because it's slower firing. They can shoot 12 inches away, but they have an 8-inch noise range. Long guns can shoot 18 inches away, but have a 12-inch noise range. And again, that might not seem very far, but remember, you're on a 30-inch board. So a 12-inch range is like a 24-inch circle around that model. It's relatively big when it comes to actually activating the zombies. Archery, silent, right? They can attack up to 18 away, crossbows 24 away. The stealth skill allows a survivor to move silently, but also represents an understanding of what triggers zombie activity. Stealth is part of a move or climb action. A successful stealth check prevents one zombie from being activated by noise during activation. The target for this check is the zombie's detection score. So if you want to move nearby and you have the stealth skill, you can make a test and you use your dexterity skill. So if the detection of a passive zombie is 4 and active zombie is 6, you have to add your relevant stat and beat that 4 in order to escape detection. Enter is like slipping through barriers, doesn't make any noise. It's like an abstraction, but it could be like picking locks, you know what I mean? Sliding through a window of a car. Setting traps. Tinkering allows you to barricade doors, repair vehicles, interact with things on the table. A barricaded door has health points equal to the tinker score of the survivor that created it, and zombies will attack a barricaded door, try and break it down. So zombies do have the enter skill typically, or the break skill rather. They can like knock things down. You think of like State of Decay, it's when you literally barricade the windows and they're like knocking them down, or like Left 4 Dead, that kind of thing. Tactics give you tactic dice equal to your tactic score, which can be used to reroll any dice rolls made during a mission round. Scout allows you to observe the mission area before deployment, allowing the team to choose an optimal timing. Survivor with this skill can move a number of zombies and or resource tokens up to 3 inches at the beginning of the mission, which is kind of cool. So like when you set up a mission table, you'll spawn the supplies and the zombies into it kind of at random. This allows you to kind of tweak their place and to make it better for when you actually enter the table. Scavengers know how to make the most of what they find during missions. When they interact with a resource token, a survivor with the skill places a number of materials equal to their scavenge store. Survivors with the scavenge place only 1 material. And then cooperation skills. These are kind of like your passive, like leadership and interaction style stuff. So like medicine allows you to do first aid. Teaching, it lets you have the teaching skill so that you can like staff a teaching area and do the training. So like training areas you can build into your refuge or your community rather. Rationing. So because you have to feed everybody, it allows you to stretch your food supply a little bit further. Mechanics allows you to do things in the workshop. And then utilities, it's like an infrastructure skill for like building stuff out and adding things like generators and kitchen equipment and stuff into your community as well. All right, character creation. So creating a starting character in the first step of this game is one of my favorite ways to do a game, right? Start with what I'm going to build and paint, and then move into how I'm going to play. So now that we have a raw understanding of the stats, let's talk about how to make somebody. Starting a community, you get 10 tiers. So as a hero's 4, right, a citizen's all the way down to 2, and like a rookie's 1, it all has to add up to 10. So a real simple way of doing it would be like you could have a tier 4 hero leading everybody, 2 tier 2s and 2 tier 1s. You get 5 people in your community to start off with, or you could have a one of each. You could have a tier 4 hero leading it, a tier 3 leader, a tier 2 citizen, and then a tier 1 rookie. So it's like Rick, Carl, Michonne, and like, I don't know, some jobber that died in season 1. I'm not Shane, right? Some rando job, whoever, what's her name's husband was, who died in the first season of the Walking Dead. And then you assign their stats, right? So the stat block for the hero is 4, 3, 2, 1. You put them in the areas you want, and then he gets 4 skills. You pick 4 skills that he has available to him, and you put them down on his character sheet. You do that for all the heroes in your table. And I think the maximum you could probably fix, you'd want to have at least 1 leader type. You could have 10 people if you took like 7 rookies and a leader. And I don't think there's actually a maximum. No, I don't think there's a maximum either. You do it however you want. So again, you can customize your community a little bit. So imagine like a school teacher and 7 children is like your beginning of the zombie apocalypse. And that's the cool thing about being able to create your community that way. You can kind of flex it in a way that you like to fit the story that you're trying to create in your solo and co-op experience. And then new recruits. Sometimes you'll find strangers at the battlefield and bring them home. When a survivor is tier 2 or higher, they already have kind of like their story written. They'll get a random skill of your choice, right? So when you first create them, their first skill is always going to be from this table. Then you get to add one that you want on top of it. But like the idea is that like they already come to you kind of partially formed, and you don't have as much of your agency over creating who they are. All right, so we got our group built. Let's talk about the community layer. So how do you play a game? So first things first, you are going to select a mission. Then you select the survivors and the equipment that are going to go on that mission. And then step 3 is you play the mission. Then there's the advancement phase. You spend your experience on character advancement, create new survivors, add materials to your storage, heal wounds, add facilities and upgrades. And then the planning phase is getting ready for the next game, right? So assign people for the facility stuff. So like if you're going to go and like tinker with something or use your mechanic skill, you're going to build a new upgrade into your refuge, then you assign the project team. And then the mission team would be people that are going to go out next time, and resting and healing happens last. And the management phase, people who came back like knocked out, they might turn into zombies and attack people. Feed your survivors, assign beds, figure out your unrest. Your unrest is going to be the difference between how many people you're able to feed and how many people had beds, because people start to get grumpy. And then check your storage, check the horde, see if anyone's going to attack you. And then people might leave based on unrest. And I like this because it's the day in the life kind of stuff. It's a week in the life in this case. But if you've watched zombie media like movies, played zombie video games, these are all tropes pulled out of that. And the game's designed to kind of recreate that experience every time you play it. Now, there are a variety of missions in here, and they can all get tweaked with the Tweak Your Apocalypse stuff as well. You can also opt not to do a mission this turn, in which case you can skip the rest of the mission phase. If you opt out of a mission for the turn, you can send out a single survivor to scavenge. The survivor must have no other assignments for the turn, and if the survivor has the scavenge skill, this adds 1 to each material type in the base storage. You get 1 food and 1, I can't remember what the other ones are, fuel. The survivor can't be doing anything else, so you can't like tinkering or doing first aid, like being in the medical center or anything like that. If the survivor lacks the skill, you can only add 1 material of any one type. So you have to have the scavenge skill to get 1 of each. If you're using the timeline of the end times, then you also need to roll for a weather effect before you set out to do things. Then you equip your mission team. All the survivors automatically have access to shoddy versions of any weapons and equipment they're required to use their skills. However, you may want to give them better stuff from the base's inventory, or you may have some cool extras like Molotovs or grenades and stuff like that and give that too. And then tactical mission, this portion of the campaign turn takes place entirely on the mission layer and is described in that chapter. So the idea of the mission phase, if you want to skip a mission, it could happen that you get so beat up during the previous mission that everybody's resting. I like the fact that you can just lay up for a week, basically. Now, it does mean that you're not bringing in as many resources in, so unrest might go up, but your guys will rest and recuperate, so they're more ready for the next mission. So it's interesting that, like, as time kind of expands across the campaign, you may make the choice sometimes to not play a game for a campaign turn in order to heal up. But the balance of that is you better hope that you had a lot of supplies in the bank so that they don't start to get grumpy and maybe leave. Advancement phase. So characters gain experience points as they survive the apocalypse. Every survivor that was on a mission during the previous phase gets an XP. 1 survivor gets a bonus 1, so you get to award a little bonusy thing. You can go to the training room, so you have like a danger room like the X-Men to go and earn extra XP. And then the survivors can spend experience on things like a skill, so they can be leveled up by spending a number of experience points equal to the skill's new level. And this includes the common skills of move and defense, which can both go to maximum of 8. So you can have people be faster and slower, which is nice as well. If, however, you want to increase a character skill from 2 to 4, you'd spend 3 XP to get the skill to 3, and then 4 XP to get it to 4, for a total of 7. So whatever like the level is how much XP it needs. So there is, and this is smart, there's an expanding cost. It's not a flat cost to increase your levels because the value goes up each time, right? The value of a skill at higher levels is going to be more than at lower levels. There's a note here too. During the magic apocalypse, survivors who have been staffed to a mystic library to learn a spell spend experience to gain the spell during character advancements. You can also become a wizard, Harry. And it's nice to get those tweaks in here. Then creates new survivors. Strangers that were rescued during the previous mission can be added to the community and refer to the character creation rules on page 13 to generate these survivors. So that would happen then. Add materials to your storage. So fuel, food, hardware was the one I was missing. It's like the nuts and bolts thing in a video game. And then roll on rare items to see if you find any. So when you find a scavenge token, you roll a d10 to see what it is. It's either, basically there's a third of a chance it's a common one, like fuel, food, and hardware. And the 10 is it's a rare item, which could be cool things like Molotovs and video game consoles and stuff like that. You have to put that in your storage though, and you may need to expand your storage too. Heal wounds, distribute any health points that were generated by base facilities and upgrades, and then health points can only be given to survivors who are assigned to healing during the previous planning phase. Remember, health points must be distributed equally amongst healing survivors, so no one gets a second one until everybody gets 1. A survivor that was assigned to rest generates 1 health point that can only be used by the resting survivor. And then viral apocalypse. Whenever a survivor would gain a health point during the heal wound step of the advancement phase, they may instead remove 1 point of infection, because in that one you have to like, it's a little bit like in what's the one I'm thinking of in The Last of Us, where you have to like manage, like, did you get exposed to spores or not? So your risk of having spore contamination or like, or the cordyceps virus goes up and down based upon the missions that you go into. And so resting can either affect like your physical injuries or your infection score as well. And then step 5, add facilities and upgrades. Any base facilities and upgrades that were assigned to the project team during the previous planning phase are finished during this step, and their effects are added to the base. Any trades that were paid for during the last planning phase are concluded. Any items that were traded for are added to the base inventory. So if you go and buy something from like wandering merchants or people that come in. And then finally, the planning phase. During the planning phase, the community decides how they should spend their resources and which survivors will be assigned to tasks. So give everybody jobs. And this is like the off-camera part. This is like the interstitials in the zombie movie where you see them like, where they make like the escape bus in Day of the Dead, in Zack Snyder's Day of the Dead, right? Where like punk music starts to play and they're all making that. Or the interstitial where like they're playing chess on the rooftop with the gun store owner across the way. It's that kind of stuff. Facility staffing is when a survivor is asked to operate one of the base's facilities. Each facility has its own rules for operation, but are beneficial to the community in some way. Facilities and their effects are described in detail in the base building chapter. A wounded survivor can be assigned to staff facility, but they don't get to rest. They don't get their health back. And then there's 3 different types of projects you can build upgrades. So build a facility, like build a new kitchen, build upgrades. So every facility has like subsets of upgrades that you can use to make them better. So like first you build a kitchen, then you can build like a gas stove to put into it, and then build or trade equipment, which means make cool stuff, not your basic versions of weapons and stuff. Any materials spent to build facilities, upgrades, or equipment are removed from the base's inventory immediately. And alternatively, equipment can be traded for by spending its trade cost in any combination of food and fuel. Trading costs more materials, but doesn't require any labor to be spent. Any number of equipment items can be built, traded for one at a time, as long as the community has the materials and labor to spend. Trades take time, and any items that were traded for won't arrive until the next advancement phase. So basically, you can like long-term invest on like, I know, like, and it doesn't need to have like a specific story. It could be like people are wandering through, there's another community nearby. It could also mean like, you know, somebody who's passing away that's going to bring something along. And then call it for the cosmic horror and viral apocalypse. When a survivor with 6 or more infection points is in a mission or project team, all their survivors not team with the fewer than 6 points gain a point, because you have like an infection thing when people are like grouped together. And then Cosmic Horror, if any of the bunk rooms at the base have the lounge upgrade, any number of survivors can be assigned to Madness Recovery. Although the total amount of Mad Resurrection is dependent upon the upgrade itself. So basically you can just like chill out because it's getting all too much. And then finally, assign your mission team. The mission team consists of the survivors that are going to be deployed in the next tactical mission. Survivors that are injured can't be assigned to the mission team. And these are the people that are going to go in the next tactical mission, basically. These survivors can be split between any number of mission teams, so more than one mission can be completed during the next campaign turn. So if you wanted to divide your group, although I wouldn't recommend splitting the party, you can, and send like 2 groups off to do 2 different things. And that means you could double your resources coming back. But the risk, obviously, is they're going to get overwhelmed. A mission team can be assigned to trade for rare goods as well. When this is decided, roll a number of d10s equal to the value of their scout score plus co-op stat amongst all your community survivors, then apply these rolls to the rare items table. The result of these rolls represent the list of possible goods the trader has available. When trading rare goods, they can be traded for the cost listed on the table in any combination of food and fuel. They won't take, whatchamacallit, I want to say parts, but they won't take parts. When trading them this way, their value is listed as value -2. Set aside the materials needed to get the items that you want according to the trade cost of rare items tables. And I like this. You pay a little bit more and spend a little more time. But if you want to get something really cool, like if you're really after something, you can find it. You just have to put the sort of like the effort into it. And then the management phase. Check for rot. If you come home with 0 health, it's possibly that you got the zombie apocalypse virus. Roll a tier check, which means you're trying to roll with a target of 12 minus the combined medical skill score of your own medical clinic staff. So if you have that upgrade in your refuge and you come up with 0 health, basically it's how likely are you to have turned into a zombie. and your tier check is dice plus your tier. So if like you're a citizen, you roll a d10 and add your tier of 2, you got to roll a 10 to survive. If the check succeeds, nothing happens. The healing continues as normal. If it fails, the survivor turns in the night, bites another survivor before they're caught and destroyed. Remove the survivor that turned and deal 1 point of damage to another survivor who's been assigned to healing during the turn's planning phase. If that survivor has 0 health after this damage done, they're removed from the community as well because they die. So bringing home dudes that are low level that were taken to 0 health is very scary. Every survivor with at least 1 point of infection needs to make a tier check with a target number equal to the total number of infection points that they currently have. Each survivor then add the total medicine skill of the community to this check if the community has access to a medical clinic. Unlike other checks, checking for rot does not automatically fail on a roll of a 1, nor does it automatically succeed on a roll of a 10. If it's failed, the survivor turns the night using the same rules as described above. And then Apocalypse Toolkit, there is like a, I like this, there's a lop off the limb rule. If you're playing with the survivor traits optional rules, when a survivor fails to check for rot rolls, instead of turning in the night and dying, you can opt out for a random permanent injury. So this is Rick losing his hand, right? You could be wheelchair bound, one-handed, one-eyed, origin injury, bad knee, bad shoulder, blind, deaf, twice shy, and player's choice. And these are all going to have special rules associated with them where basically you become like maimed over the course of the campaign. Finally, you got to feed your survivors. All the tier 1 and tier 2 survivors cost you 1 food. Every tier 3 and tier 4 costs you 2 food. So as your guys level, it's going to be, they require more nutrition, basically. And it's calculated every single turn. Subtract your hunger score from the community's total population. If the result's negative, all survivors have their stats, strength, dex, intelligence, cooperation reduced by that number until a minimum of 0 until the next turn's management phase. So like, let's say you have 5 food. You have a starting group, right? So I'm tier 4. I need a tier 3, a tier 2. They would require 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to feed, which means your net would be 0. You'd have no penalties. If you only had 4 food, everybody's stats would go down by 1. So the hero would be 3, 2, 1, 0. The leader would be 2, 1, 0, 0. And the citizen would be like 1, 0, 0, 0. So like you become basically starving and your stats start to go down as you starve to the point where like everybody could just be at fully 0 if you're completely starving to death. So you're just bodies on the table instead. Then you assign beds. If your community's population is greater than the number of beds, this is your exhaustion score. If your exhaustion score is higher than the number of survivors assigned to the mission team, remove 1 survivor of your choice from that team and they have to idle because they've sleep deprived. They're so exhausted they can't go out. Then calculate unrest. As your community struggles with life amongst the zombies, they may become discontent. This is your unrest score is hunger plus exhaustion. So the difference in how much you were able to not feed your people and how many people didn't sleep becomes your overall unrest. Then finally, you have to check storage. At this step, check the amount of each material you have stored versus your maximum storage. Otherwise, it spoils. Any materials committed to an upcoming trade mission aren't counted, though, because they're already packed up to go. So, like I said, you need to you only hold so much stuff game to game. And that means it's kind of a cool cap because you can't just infinitely stockpile stuff and then never have to be assigning like unrest to people. And then finally, check the horde. As the horde hears the community's noise and smells their brains, it gets more and like bigger and gathers. This is tracked as siege threat. It's the number of stacked staff facilities, so the number of people working in a workshop, number of survivors in a project team, any base features that affect threat. So like some louder things can actually like up your threat, like if you have like a generator or something like that. And then the number of campaign turns since the last siege. The idea being that like the longer you go without getting attacked, the more likely zombies are to finally notice you, right, over time. And it's calculated every turn. It's not cumulative. During this step, roll a d10 plus the siege threat. If it's 16 plus, you must play the siege defense mission as your next choose mission in the choose mission step. If a siege is triggered, any materials set aside for rare items and trade are lost. Any survivors reduced to 0 health during the siege defense mission are removed from their assignments for the turn, subtracting their labor from the project team and leaving the facilities unstaffed. So basically like anything you had going on in between games, if those guys get killed during the siege or like knocked out and they have to recover, that work stops, right? And then finally, departures. As your survivors also see the horde heading towards the base, they may take the better part of valor and run for the hills. If the community's unrest and siege threat is ever over 10 plus, the lowest tier survivor at the base leaves the community. If there's multiples of lower tier, then they choose. So like it starts with like the rookies and other ones might just start taking off. Cosmic Horror, all survivors who have at least 13 madness points at the departure step become lost and leave the community, taking all their items in their inventory with them. Keep these survivors recorded, but add them to the list of the lost because they might show up as insane people later on. And that's like the core mechanics, right? So like it's the before, during, and after of the game. And then the mission layer. So how do you set it up? So first thing, you build the mission area, put your table down, your 30-inch thing, spawn random elements. So first is the zombies, then the resource tokens, then the strangers, then any repairable vehicles. The random elements are going to put down. So you plot your mission skills, like use the scout skill afterwards to move your zombies and resource tokens, use the trap skill to place trap tokens, and use the tactics skill to generate any tactics dice you're going to get to use later on. Bonus things could be like if you're using timeline to the end times and you roll for special elements like weather and stuff. And then Cosmic Horror, before you begin the mission, roll a d10 for each lost survivor and add the number of XP of that survivor that's been spent. A result of 18 plus, the survivor is placed in the mission as a stranger. When rescued, they return to their full abilities and regain any items held when they became lost. If the roll fails, the lost survivor gains an XP. So like the guys that go insane and wander off, they can come back as strangers, but they do follow the stranger rules. And then tactical rounds. So now we're to the nitty gritty of we've set the table up, right? We've got all of our random stuff down, and there are special missions too, but this is like the general setup rules. Then we have our actual like activation steps. So missions are played through a series of tactical rounds. Each one's divided into 4 steps. So pre-activation, which is like readying everybody, survivor activation, where they do stuff and also zombies react to them. And then the post-activation step, where an end of mission conditions are checked and see if you've won. And then finally the zombie activation step. So any active zombies might like start running towards you. Every survivor gets 1 activation per round with 2 actions. The actions available depend on the context, but most common ones are like move, range attack, melee attack, and interact, which covers all of the like in-game mission actions. Actions can be repeated during a single activation unless specifically like, there's a prohibition against it. And the survivor activation step ends as soon as all survivors have been activated once. An activated survivor can choose not to use any or all of their actions. Every time a survivor takes an action, which may be multiple times during the activation, there's a chance that zombies react. When a zombie is activated, it gets 1 single action determined by their AI. The action, if they're passive, so basically zombies are like terrain. They're always on the table and they're kind of idling when they're passive. They become active when someone activates nearby them and they detect them, right? So if they detect them, then their action and passive is always to become aggressive. So now they're active. Once they're aggressive, they'll do more things. And that's only if they're inside the noise value of what's being done. So let's say you fired a long-range weapon, a long arm. Every zombie within 12 inches could potentially detect that model if it made that action and would make a detection test. If they were passive, they'd become active. If they're active, they might run towards them and stuff like that. And then finally, in the post-activation effects and the zombie activation, activate all your aggressive zombies. If there's any aggressive zombies active, then you activate them one at a time until they've all been activated. No zombie can be activated twice. If there's no aggressive zombies in the mission area, turn the passive zombie furthest from all survivors aggressive. So even if you're sneaking around and you're like stealth killing all the zombies, at least one of them every turn is going to become aggressive because of something. It hears like an animal or it like wakes up. And then finally spawn 1 passive zombie using placement points. So the D10 times 3, and it just grids out. And the idea here is that like, no matter how well you've like scouted the area, they're going to come crawling out of barns or under cars or whatever. There's zombies just lurking everywhere. So there's always something on the table that's scary and dangerous. If this spawns a passive zombie within 3 of an aggressive zombie or a survivor, they turn aggressive because aggressive zombies always turn other zombies aggressive because they rally each other up. And then noise of value, and zombie activation. Any number in that bracket of the noise X will potentially activate a zombie. And then a failed attack activates the targeted zombie regardless of their noise value. So if you shoot somebody and they don't like get hit, it will activate them even if they don't like make the detection tests. And no zombie can ever be activated twice by a single action. A survivor that's in contact with the zombie may only take attack actions or evade. Evade is like your break off action. They can also form into hordes if they can't see somebody when they activate, which is neat. So like the active zombies, if they have line of sight to someone, will run towards them. Line of sight if they have like the ability to like detect them. If they can't detect them, then they run into like the next nearest zombie that's passive and turn them aggressive. Or if there's only other aggressive zombies, then they form up into hordes and they activate as a group. The line of sight enemy skill. Some special enemies have the line of sight skill. The skill is listed as a number, similar to the way noise values are recorded. Enemies of this skill are activated by any action from a survivor within the listed line of sight distance. So basically, this is like your Infinity ARO where they might shoot you or something like that. Or like detect you and run towards you. An enemy has line of sight to the survivor if that enemy could reasonably see the survivor. Line of sight's checked at the end of the activation at the same time as noise is checked. And then here's all our actions. So move has a 6-inch activation radius, and then like sub moves like jumping, falling, and swimming, additional noises. Climbing ladders, difficult terrain. So like it has additional movement. Evade. Now this is the one where you break off an inch if you manage to pass. It's a tier check plus of 4 plus the number of zombies they're in contact with. So if it was D10 plus your tier, let's say you're tier 2 and you're in contact with 3 zombies, it would be a test of 7. So D10 plus 2, try to beat a 7. And you move away the difference you beat the target number by. So if you equal it, you don't move away at all. If you roll an 8, like an 8, you back them away 1 inch, a 9, 2 inches, however much you succeed by. And then climbing, stuff between 1 and 2 inches tall, and it has to be, conceivably climbable. And then finally, actions to attack. So range attacks by weapon type. That would be based on your skill, right? So like a long arm would be a long arm range attack. To make a ranged attack, a model must have line of sight. If a survivor can reasonably see the enemy, then they can attack them. And zombies don't necessarily block line of sight. A line of sight can be drawn through only one window. So if you're near 2 windows, you can't see through both. But you can't be into one window and out another. A ranged attack cannot target a zombie that is in contact with their survivor. And then melee attacks by weapon type and base to base. You can also shove to do no damage, but you make a tier check with the target equal to the target's defense surf. So like a zombie that's not active has a defense of 4. You make a tier check. So like tier 2 citizen would roll D10 and add 2. And then if you manage to successfully push them, again, the threshold of success would be how far they get pushed. And then interacting. And there's a bunch of different interact actions. So with a resource token, you can search it or gather the things. They make noise based upon like how much you're doing. So when a survivor interacts with a resource token, they search it, revealing how many materials can be gathered from it. And then once they gather after they've searched the token, it's like a 2-step process. So you can't just grab them. You got to dig through and see if there's anything good there. And once you found what's good there, then you can actually gather it. And you move one material in your inventory, provided you have enough space to carry it. Remove the material from the resource token and mark it on the survivor's character sheet. So first you determine what's in it, you crack it open, and then you start taking the stuff out and loading it up in your backpack. Which is funny because, again, it's a very state of decay mechanic, and it's very similar to that video game. It popped in my head immediately. And then we got like first aid. You can pick up bodies. You can rescue people with a stranger. A stranger can only be rescued by a character's tier levels equal to or greater. So like a rookie won't convince like a citizen level stranger to show up, but like a hero might very well do so. And as soon as you do, the stranger becomes a survivor with health points equal to their tier level, move 6, defense 6, and no skills. This new survivor is exhausted and not performing their best. They'll receive their skills and stuff during the advancement phase. So when you bring them back, that's when you incorporate these guys into your group. They become kind of like NPCs. You can drive and enter vehicles, load and unload them, and take off, which is kind of neat. And then you got like variable rules for the vehicles and stuff too. You can barricade a doorway to keep people from opening and closing it, which is nice. And in the magical apocalypse, you can also cast a spell, but you lose a point of humanity. And then damage and incapacitation. When an attack succeeds, you take a point of damage, which reduces your health. Your health is equal to your tier, right? So a rookie has 1 health. You get a 0, you're knocked out. You got to get carried off. If you have a citizen, you get 2 health. So you can hit twice. And by using the interact action on an incapacitated character, another survivor can pick up an item off them as well. So you can also take their stuff if you need to. And then finally, the zombies AI. So you can see here the zombies have 2 classes. There's a passive AI where they don't attack at all. They don't even move. Their defense is 4, their protection's 4. So it's easy to like melee and take out an unsuspecting zombie. They've all got 1 health. And then if they become aggressive, then their attack becomes 0. So they don't add anything to the roll. The defense is 6. And that would mean that like the average survivor with a defense of 6, they would need to beat a 6 to hit. Defense of 6, detection 6, move 6, and health 1. And they have the break 1 skill, which means they can attack the barricades that you build. They do, however, have a noise 8, which means they can activate other zombies with their own break skill, which makes them bad at grouping things up. Whenever 3 or more aggressive zombies are within 3 inches of each other, they form a horde. When one member of a horde is activated, all the others are also activated, and they basically move as like a group instead. All aggressive hordes within 3 inches of any member of the horde are considered to be part of the horde, and they use the modified horde AI for activating. And then there's just like a checklist. It's kind of like Rangers of Shadow Deep, like if X, then Y. So check for contact, then they attack you in melee. Check for movement range. If they're inside your move score +2, then they'll come towards you and try and attack you. Check for passive zombies. If that's the first two aren't true, then you try and activate passive zombies and make them aggressive. And then check for aggressive zombies. If you can do that, then you move towards them and try and form a horde. And then random movement. If there's nothing else and you're aggressive, you just kind of wander around and you lurch around and you can't see anybody. And then the zombie horde AI is the same. It's just another like if and. So check for contact, they'll attack. Check for their movement range. If they're within their move score +2, then they'll attack. They'll like move towards you. And then they don't go towards passive zombies, and they do not check for aggressive zombies. They don't get bigger. Otherwise, like the horde would perpetually move around. So they'll randomly move if they're not in movement range of the enemy. But other individual zombies may go join the horde. And then you've got your random movement. They always use all their movements. They never leave the mission area, and they can't move through each other. And then we got our cool equipment. So everybody starts, if you have a skill, you have like a shoddy version of something. So if you have like a bladed weapon skill, you have like a notched old machete or an axe or something, like a kitchen knife. But if you have a quality stuff, then you get +1 to your skill stores. And that would mean like you find like Michonne's katana. You know what I mean? Like those are like the cooler versions of your basic equipment. Special rules for all the different weapon types and how they work, right? How much noise they make. So like a revolver is 8-inch, bows are silent, so are crossbows. Shotguns have a loud shot, but they have some special rules for knocking things back and stuff too. Blunt and bladed weapons, heavy weapons. So even melee weapons do a little bit of damage or a little bit of noise. I like this piece of art. It's our Michonne type character there hanging outside the Haven full service gas station. And then some of the variation stuff. So like playing Cosmic Horror, you might have a flamethrower, a harpoon gun, flaming arrows, and incendiary shells, and then silver bullets and enchanted melee weapons for the magical apocalypse. And this is just some quick reference sheets here for all your equipment. I do like that they color-coded all this stuff from when you're using variations so you can quickly find it. And then all of your like rare stuff. So when you find rare equipment, you find like a weapon. So like things like a gas. And a lot of these are like upgrades for your base too. So like smoke grenades are like things you can send to a tactical team, but like a flat pack shelf, it's like an IKEA shelving unit. It increases your storage in a supply room. And then cool equipment, backpacks that give you a +1 carry, binoculars that add your scout skill, burglar's tools that add your enter skill. And that's typically what these things do. They just add to like a specific skill tree and give you a bonus to it if you have a skill bonus. So remember there was a -1 in one of the earlier ones where you had like a poor quality weapon. And then we've got all of our extra gear. So reinforced clothing, like it's wearing like was it the Kingdom in The Walking Dead where they're wearing like hockey pads? That would be that. And then like improvised armor. You might find like some SWAT armor or something like that. And then there's like one-use items too, like adrenaline shots to get a point of health back temporarily. Bandages to restore a lost point of health. Firework bundles to make noise and like draw people towards it. All kinds of cool traps. And then bonus stuff for like the different variations too, like using an antiviral grenade, a medicated wrap, warding stones for evil magic stuff. And then sleeping bags, get an extra bed when they're putting in a bunk room. A video game console. This reduces unrest by 3 and increases the siege threat by 1 because it's loud, but it needs power to work. I thought that was kind of neat. Rare weapons like a historical katana. Once again, leaning into the Walking Dead stuff. And then rules for vehicles. And vehicles kind of have their own, like, you can load them up. They get passenger and inventory slots for, like, putting gear into them. So they're good for, like, if there's more supply on the table than you can carry, you can load it into vehicles, hotwire them, and then take off. And then once you've got them, you've got them. So, like, you can take missions to burn fuel, basically, to go and have them to load up for the end of the game. So it's kind of cool because it's almost like a terrain piece that you get to place. And then once it's loaded up, you just go and interact with it, load everybody into it, and drive away. The vehicle thing is nice because it doesn't require a bunch of driving rules. Think of it more like a Space Marine drop pod. Like it arrives on the table, you interact with it, and your final interaction is you all close the doors and then you take off. It's nice because it doesn't add a bunch of extraneous rules to the game for like having to deal with vehicles. It's an abstract and it's just this like pack mule basically. And then we're in a base building. Obviously your bases have tiers. So like a starter thing is like a small townhome, and you could move into other bases and upgrade them too. So you could be living in a summer camp, and you can see here how many slots they have. So you can hold 4 hardware, 4 food, and 4 fuel in it. It has 5 facility slots, and it starts with 2 empty, right? So the garage and the front yard are empty. You can build whatever you want into them, but it has 2 bunk rooms and a kitchen, and they start like pre-installed, so you don't have to build those. The summer camp's got 3 empty slots and 7 total. And the 4 things it starts with a workshop, 2 bunk rooms and a kitchen. But it's a little more like, and it's got the theater arts field, a sports field, and a stable that you can build more stuff into. And each of these is like, well, what do I want my theme to be for base building? You can live in a church. And again, all of this is going to feel familiar to like different games you've played. And I won't go through all of these because obviously the idea here is that there's some variation. There's perks and drawbacks to all of them. And then the tier 2 one is like a hobby farm. It allows you to make lumber and stuff like that. They all have like different sort of like extra bonuses. A distillery. And you might move into these, an outdoor sporting shop. And the Renaissance Festival. This is my favorite one. The fact that you can just live at the Ren Fair. It has 8 building slots and 5 empty because it starts with a blacksmith tools, curtain wall, and a kitchen. The curtain wall is siege throws reduced by 3 every turn. Blacksmithing tools have the labor cost in building bladed, blunt, heavy, and archery weapons. And a kitchen, which can be upgraded. But you don't start with anything else, right? And a hydroelectric dam. So you get like automatic power, right? You have utilities automatically, white noise. All indoor bunk rooms count as having 1 additional bed, as you can sleep anywhere. And then catwalks plus 2 labor is added to the pool each turn because you can go on the catwalks. Firehouses. And then the various upgrades you can add to them. So you can add like extra bunk rooms with extra bed, and you have to buy them with hardware and labor. So everything's going to have a cost associated to those 3 key materials. And the labor is you have to assign someone to do it that's hopefully not resting or injured. And then you have to make it without a siege to the next game. And then it unlocks in the maintenance phase of the next game. So it's there basically the week after. The week you're doing it's when you're all setting up and you're paying the cost. The week after is when it unlocks and becomes available for the management of the base on that turn. And there's tons of cool things you can add and then upgrade to. So when you upgrade a kitchen, you can add like a refrigerator to it, right? You can add a gas range for extra cooking. And what it does is it increases its ability. So a kitchen can be staffed with a survivor, good at rationing food with the rationing skill. A refrigerator, each refrigerator upgrade produces 1 food per turn and raises the base's maximum food storage by 1. So like the house that could hold 4 can now hold 5. And you make a food every turn that just gets added to the stash. Cooking over open flames is good. It can be so much better. If you have a gas range, more food's prepared and you can produce 1 extra food. In addition, the community can crank up the heat in exchange for 2 fuel for 1 food. So you can spend your fuel resource to buy more food to feed people. It might make your car smell like fast food, but biofuel is an excellent way to keep your labs moving. Each biofuel lab produces a food point per turn and allows you to exchange 2 food for 1 fuel. So a lot of these upgrades are allowing you to like convert, right, one thing into another thing. And then we've got our like a quick reference for all this stuff. And then various missions. So the first mission in the campaign for this is always going to be start a new community. You have to claim a new base, gather materials, then the herd, retrieve vehicles, rescue strangers, siege defense, and rare goods trader are like the bonus missions that happen after that. And these are like it's almost like a story from an episode of a zombie apocalypse thing. And I'm not going to spend too much going into this, but the first one, start a new community, it's all about building up your message area to put a small house in the middle because you start with this tier 1 area that you're going to go into. And you might move location to location. So you don't want to build them up too much because this is kind of like your first base of operations. And week to week, you might decide to upgrade or move into a new location. All the other ones are about what it says on the tin, basically, is like, how do I tell a different story? So for instance, when we're talking about this one right here, which is Neighbor's Rifle. A survivor in the community used to live next door to a firearms enthusiast who has an upgraded AR-15. It's like, go find a special cool piece of gear, and you get special setup for that. Crash convoy, there might be supplies in these trucks. We go look for them, and so on. And these allow you to kind of zhuzh up and pick your mission in between rounds. And then finally, Origins of the Rot. And this is building up your own end times. So you've seen this referred to all through the book, but basically it's what kind of additional things you're going to manage. So the viral apocalypse is about managing the infection level of your people. The cosmic horror is about madness, and the magic apocalypse is adding additional types of bad guys and then additional skill trees, because obviously you're able to become a wizard and go after it. Humanity, the Veil. And I like this because, again, you can use a different miniature collection for each of these things and then have all of these other things in here too, like zombie cougars, zombie bears, and zombie chargers to add like the tinkering with your apocalypse stuff. And the virus obviously is designed to then like be infecting different layers of things. So it's a bit like that movie Annihilation, where stuff can get weirder. We got all of our weird cosmic horrors like tentacle zombies, ghouls, and hunters from beyond. And then magical stuff like werewolves, skeletons, and vampire spawn. Because obviously, you know, it's the Army of Darkness. And the toolkit allows for different levels of like adding in weird common zombies. So like this is your Left 4 Dead stuff, runners, thinkers, hardheads, which is like, you know, SWAT guys still wearing helmets. Different survival rules, being able to like go over your capacity for carrying stuff, making extra noise to do extra like inches of movement and stuff, and then how to like break up hordes and zombie crawls. And this is just, again, the nice thing is the core mechanics are relatively straightforward, but you can add more to the game if you want to. Some of this we referenced earlier, like the permanent injuries, like wheelchair bound, all the different rules for that. And then we got extra mega cool zombies, fog zombies, exploders. This is where we get the real Left 4 Dead stuff. The Rat King, right, which is our Rat King from, The Last of Us, Crushers. And then unseen complications and are going to be things like weather events, advanced vehicle rules. So again, I said they're abstracting the core rules. There are vehicle combat rules for driving around, driving things over with your car and stuff too. And then timelines. So this is like, how long do we play through, right? What might happen. And the idea is this is kind of the seasonal rules that would add like summer, winter, fall, and spring. And what kind of effects might that have over the course of a year? And then finally, road trip, going out on the road, doing like new communities. And so as we get through this, there's obviously a ton of additional things that you can add to kind of customize it. But we are going long now. And I think that's a good showing. And obviously the back of this, we also have our survivor sheets and our, base sheet too. So let's check in with the chat. Obviously this was lovingly laid out by Modifius. So kudos to them and to Jordan for writing all this out. And there's some pluggies here for some additional cool games that you can play. Well, let's see what the chat thinks. So there it is. Where's my Ash Williams Astragon Ecstasy? Yeah, so you want to do the Army of Darkness stuff. Matt says, I really like the detection mechanic for noise. And then Jordan says, late to the live show, nobody remembers the names of the Tier 1 survivors. No, well, welcome, Jordan. Thanks for letting us check out your game. And then finally, Ryan Dunphy says, oh yeah, that super memorable character. What's her name's husband? No, from the first season of The Walking Dead. She's got her own show now. It's her and Daryl. They're like oh God, I can't remember her name. You know what I'm talking about. After X says, can I have a dog in my community? No, absolutely not. We know that dogs can't get experience either from the writing of Last Days. And then Matt says, just here to give praise to Jordan. I love the sound of this game. I'll pick it up with the Wargames Atlantic Zombies. And then Jordan says, those Wargames Atlantic minis are great. I hope you have a good time. And then we're just trolling on me and talking about dogs opening doors for the rest of this. Trinidad's Workshop says, the bear from Annihilation, what nightmare fuel. That was probably the scariest part of that movie. All right, so I'm going to take a break and have a drink of water because I've been gabbing about County Road Z, and we're going to jump back in with All Things Zombie. So if you guys have not checked out All Things Zombie is a classic miniature game of the zombie apocalypse movie genre. And that oeuvre is well defined here. It goes right into the movie tropes from the beginning. So with County Road Z having like a sort of a strong sort of like connection to being film, or like leaning into like the things that have happened in classic film and media for zombie apocalypse stuff, This one really makes it that way. The game itself is a tight 60 pages. It is a nice, concise miniature game. So if you're not looking for tons of tables and sort of like crunch, this one's more episodic. It's designed to be played as one-off scenes. And the scenes, the stars are your characters, and the citizens and the zombies are the ones who are sort of like they're interacting with. Each player assumes the role of a human, a star of the movie. They must survive a world overrun by zombies. You can start as a citizen, but once it's obvious that zombies are permanent, you have to choose your path. Either a ganger, a militia, or a survivor. If you kind of like one of the different like tropes of Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, and Night of the Living Dead, right? So Night of the Living Dead, it's a survivor. Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, there's gangers. There's like the biker gang with Tom Savini in it. And of course, you've got the militia, you get the army guys in Day of the Dead. And this game is pretty firmly Romero zombies, right? Slow zombies and all the tropes that come into that. No matter how you choose to play all things zombie, the zombies are run by the game mechanics. When playing on the same side, simply have another player roll for the zombies and hostile humans whenever you encounter them. All things zombie can be a one-off game, but it really shines as a campaign where all of your adventures are linked together using the same characters and stats from prior games. And then word of advice, stop boxes. Be sure to read the rules one section at a time and follow the stop box at the end of each section. If you have a question with the rules, just keep reading as the answers will come along shortly. Now, this is a 3x3 table game. So again, this is one of the reasons I paired it with County Road Z, because County Road Z is a 30-inch table, and later on we'll talk about Last Days briefly. Same idea, right? It's a kitchen table skirmish game. You can use some D6s in a variety of ways, and this was one of, when I first played this game, this was one of the things that confused me. So they actually do a good job in this newer edition of like breaking down what all the dice rolls mean. Measuring device in inches, any combination of metal, plastic, or paper figures in a consistent scale, and some buildings and terrain features. Now, section 2.1, again, this is in red. This is one of those sections where it might not make sense. There's different ways of rolling a d6. There's passing dice, there's counting successes, there's possibilities, and there's reading and adding dice, and then half a d6. This is the only thing that drives me crazy with these rules. Half a d6 just means d3. I don't know why they say half a d6 instead of d3. I always read it as like 1 divided 2d6, which like confused the shit out of me. They mean half a d6. It's a d3. Everybody knows d3. I don't why they don't. Just don't say d3. It's an incredibly bespoke, confusing way of saying d3. Passing dice is basically a target number roll. So whenever you roll an individual dice, each dice score that passes the target number is a pass, and each one is the other one's a fail. So the score is equal to or lower than the target number. This is a roll good the game. So if your target number is 2, you're trying to roll 1s and 2s. Every 1, 2 would be a pass. And isn't passing 0d6 like failing 2d6? No, because you're counting the number of passed d6s. So if you pass 0d6, it means you got 0 passes. Counting successes, another way we'll use d6s and roll them to count successes. A roll of 1, 2, or 3 is always a success, and a roll of 4, 5, or 6 is always a failure. So there's no target number. It's just a flat 50-50, and you're trying to figure out how many dice passed and how many failed. Possibilities, so if like a random event's taking place, it'll say like possibility 1, 2, roll a d6 on a 1 or 2, whatever it is happens. And then reading and adding the dice, whenever you read, simply read the result as rolled. When rolling a 2 on 3d6, in this way you add the scores together to get a total. And then, yeah, the half a d6 thing, which I fucking hate, which is just a d3. And then how many d6? How many d6 do you roll? This is found by looking in the upper left-hand corner of each table. When a number appears and tells you how many d6s to roll. When a word appears, that means roll 1 d6 for each point of whatever word. When a number appears, this means the table is informational. No dice are required. It's a very wordy way of saying this. You got facing, figures and terrain. Sizes range between 6 and 54 millimeters. Just saying it's consistent. And then basing things on something roughly an inch. Again, as this is an older game, a lot of it is like designed to tell the player, like, do what you want, do what your collection says to do. Because there was not, in 2005, 2006, there was not a huge collection of like zombie apocalypse miniatures out there. I think Studio Miniatures was one of the only ones. And, you know, some Foundry stuff, like maybe a few like Rebel minis, been 15 mil. There wasn't a ton. Facings, 180 front and back. And then tables. Tables help to create the story. So like there's a lot of random charts in here to roll charts on. Stop. All things zombie fade to black uses 6-sided dice called D6s. You'll roll them in a number of different ways. Passing dice, counting successes, possibilities, reading and adding the dice, and then half a D6 is a D3. All right, defining your figures. All your models, there's 6 things that can define them. Are they a star or a grunt? What's their rep? Do they have any attributes? What's their class? What kind of weapons do they have? And are they wearing any kind of protection? The star is you. The grunts are the people that aren't the player. They can be friends and foes. Why use stars? One question may be asked, why do we use stars into our war games? It gives you the freedom of choice and to personalize your guys. Star advantage. All stars, so one of the things in 2-hour war games is the star is always like the main protagonist character. They have things called star power, larger than life, cheating death, and free will. They're your personification, they're your avatar on the battlefield. So star power is basically it's like might points in Lord of the Rings. You can give 1 or 2 star power dice to grunts and co-stars if you like. Here's how you do it. Star power can't be used to affect damage suffered from a zombie, but you can pass star power off to reduce damage. And it's like a resource pool that you're going to trade off to give to people to try and keep them from dying. Whenever a figure with star power takes damage from range fire or melee attacks, it immediately rolls its current star power D6s. Read each D6's results. 1, 2, or 3 reduce the damage by a level. 4, 5, or 6 means the damage stays and the D6 is retained for future use. So basically, every time you fail a star power roll, your pool stays the size of the number of failures, and it's only the ones that you expend basically that go away until finally you're completely out of star power. Any result of 6 means the damage stays, but that die is removed from the figure's star power for the rest of the encounter. So you can still lose them. The 4s and 5s are the ones that go back. Damage is reduced in the following ways. An obviously dead result becomes an out of the fight result. An out of the fight result becomes a carry on. If damage is reduced by star power to carry on during a melee round, another round of melee is immediately fought because you fight to the death there. And if damage is reduced by star power to carry on by ranged weapon fire, the character ducks back instead. It is possible to reduce damage by multiple levels if you roll several results of 1, 2, or 3. So let's say I got obviously dead. I had 3 star power. If I roll 3d6 and I get a 1, a 2, and a 5, the 5 would go back into my pool. The 1 would reduce obviously dead to out of the fight, and then out of the fight to carry on for the second one with the 3, and then the 5 would go back. So basically it's like, do you get lucky and how often do you get lucky? I guess they're more like fate points than they are like might points from Lord of the Rings. And then larger than life. Basically, it's the cinematicness of it all. Stars cannot be killed by any human with a rep lower than the star. The worst result they get is out of the fight. So you can never go to obviously dead unless they're another star. They're like a villain attacking you. Creating cheating death. A star can be killed by any human with equal or higher rep. When this occurs, the star may be declared that he's cheating death. He can immediately be removed from the table and whisked to safety, and the encounter is immediately over. When a player chooses to cheat death, his rep is immediately reduced 1 level. So if you're rep 4, you go to rep 3, but if you're down to rep 1, you go to rep 0. So you only cheat death the number of times equal to your reputation. Free will. Each time a star must take certain reaction tests, he can choose which of the 3 possible results he wants without rolling the dice. You can either receive fire, man down, insight chest, or charge into melee. And then stars and zombies, all these star advantages are pretty cool, but they have a downside. We've touched on that, but let's make it clear. Star power cannot be reduced, be used when damaged by a zombie. Larger than life cannot be used when damaged by a zombie, and cheating death cannot be used when damaged by a zombie. So the zombies are the most lethal thing to the stars because it's a zombie apocalypse. Rep is a combination of your experience, morale, and motivation, and briefly describes the quality of you in a game. So rep 6 would be the exceptional quality, like truly larger than life heroes. Rep 5 is adept survivors. Rep 4 is reliable people. Rep 3 is everyday people, and rep 2 is like the extremely old or the extremely young. There is no maximum rep, but there definitely is obviously dead. And then stop. Characters either stars or grunts. All grunts are controlled by the game mechanics. Star power can reduce star damage levels. Star power cannot be used on damage taken from zombies. Larger than life stars cannot be killed by anyone with a lower rep. Cheating death can save a star's life, but it reduces their rep by 1. Free will allows stars to pass 2 or 1 or 0d6 on certain reaction tests, and all figures have rep, which is used to take reaction tests, shoot, and more. All right, attributes. Attributes are used to further define your character. So you have your rep, but then you just have some weird skills that you're exceptionally good at. These can be things like being a medic, being attractive, It counts as plus 1d6 when taking the talk test against the opposite sex, or same sex if you want to decide to make the rule that way. Brawler counts as plus 1d6 when in melee. Dim counts minus d6 when taking a talk test. Rage counts plus 1d6 when in melee, counts plus 1d6 when taking the charge into melee test. Runt counts as minus 1d6 when taking the charge into melee test. And then Slow only rolls d6 when taking the fast move test. These are like the different weird skills that you could have. You could be a poser. Will roll only 1d6 when taking the receive fire and man down tests. Initiative counts 1 rep higher for activation purposes when operating alone. And hard as nails. Once during the encounter, the character treats its first human inflicted obviously dead result as carry on instead because he just shrugs it off. It's the guy that just like he gets punched and he just turns around and stares at you. And then class. In all things zombie fade to black, all players have one of 4 classes: a citizen, ganger, militia, or survivor. In addition, there are 2 non-player characters, which is military and police, because you don't get to play as those. Each class will have its own non-player characters, and then each of these will be credited for any of the grunts that are with them, so like who comes with you, basically, and who's like aligned to you. And then at the start, during the first 20 days of the zombie outbreak, which is what this game represents, all players are citizens. On day 21 at the latest, you must make a choice, and you can choose to either be a ganger, militia, or survivor. So what's cool about this game is you start off as like people just thrown together by the outbreak, and you slowly develop into what you're going to become. Citizens, your average person before the outbreak. You're a citizen until one of the first 4 things happens. You survive past 20 days and choose to become a ganger, a militia, or a survivor, or you die. And then citizen no more. Previously, we said that players are citizens until the 21st day. However, after all 3 of these milestones are reached, you can then choose. If you kill at least 3 zombies, if you've had combat with an armed human and cause it damage, and if you've taken and successfully passed the See the Feast test. So basically, like if you're if you're watching a bunch of zombies eat a human, if you're seeing the feast. The idea here is like of an act of like extreme zombie survival can happen. It's funny because in The Walking Dead, I like this rule because in The Walking Dead, there's a quiz that Rick gives people, like how many people have you killed? And that's like one of his like tests to see who comes in and who doesn't come in is like, are these people safe or not? And the whole, you've had combat with an armed human and cause a damage thing, because everybody's had to hurt somebody basically to get that far. That's a really interesting, I like that mechanics in there. And it's like reflective of like a thing that happens in a lot of zombie media. Gangers, basically, they only care about themselves. Military, as the outbreak spread, they were the last hope, but they're NPCs. Militia, after the Zeds overran the world, the remnants of the military and police formed militia units, and they established order and stayed in charge. Police, again, they break down, but they become militia eventually. The police and military survivors are the ones that are like still operating on their mission. Survivors, these are the good guys, the folks that have been placed in a horrible situation are trying to work together. And then weapons. Most figures assume to have a ranged weapon. They can be some kind of like secondary or even third weapon that's like a bladed weapon. And then stop. What are your attributes? All right, start your band. So forming your group of zombie survivors. You will start the game by yourself, the star. You can then recruit characters during the game using the talk table or use the following procedure if you want to start with a band. So either you can be by yourself, wandering around like you're Rick and you wake up in the hospital, or you can be, and this is all, that's a little Walking Dead reference. You could be trapped in the farmhouse. Like you could be Barbara in the cemetery, basically, in the Night of the Living Dead. Like there's a bunch of ways that this could like play out in zombie media. You could be Cillian Murphy waking up in the hospital bed because it's the same opening as The Walking Dead. And there's other ways you can start it. So during the first 20 days, you can only recruit citizens because there's only those available. Go to the appropriate NPC generator and then roll up a stat, roll a d6 and go down the left-hand column. So basically you're trying to recruit somebody. And those are in 3.5.2 to see who you get. Which is back. Oops. Here. 3.5.2. Oh, it's the charts at the end. Never mind. The charts are down here. I'll jump back and forth. And you can only recruit grunts from the same class, but at the start of the game and during it, the number of figures in your band cannot exceed your reputation. So if your rep is 5, then you can have 4 grunts basically in your group. And then you get group cohesion. At the start of the encounter, each player must deploy their figures into groups. Here's how you do it. A group is any number of figures that will activate at the same time. The smallest group is 1. There's no maximum, so you can have everybody activate as a group of 5 or have everybody go individually. Figures that start the turn in the same group will activate at the same time. Figures in groups can have different reps. Group cohesion, you have to stay within 4 of one or more other person in the group. Carrying on figures in the group, so basically people that are still walking around. If you're injured, you can leave people behind. And then they form separate groups. You can also split up your groups during the game. And then leaders, there are 2 types of leaders, all things zombie fade to black. Star leaders, this is you and your non-player star leaders, so if you're doing a co-op game. And then temporary leaders is the figure with the highest rep in the group that's not led by a star. So if you have 2 rep 2 characters and a rep 3 character as a group, and then a rep 4 and a rep 1, or rep 2, you could have yourself be the leader with the rep 2. So let's say it's Carl and Rick. And then the other group, the one who's rep 3 would lead the other 2 rep 2s. And then replacing, if you die after the game, the original leader was killed, the temporary leader or another character will assume leadership of the band when it was disbanded. And then leader die. Leader die represents the ability of the leader to lead a situation. The leader die is an off-color D6 that the leader rolls in addition to any D6, only when he's with the group. The result of leader D6 is used to influence the D6 rolled by other people in the group. So leader die is only used when receiving fire, man down, or reaction tests. To use a leader die, roll a D6 compared to the rep of the leader. If the score is equal or less than the rep of the leader, it's passed. So your rep is always your skill. So if you're rep 5, your 1 to 5s pass and your 6s fail. If you're rep 2, the 1 to 2s pass and the higher ones fail. If the score is equal or less than the rep of the leader die, it's passed. If it's higher, then it's failed. If the leader die is passed, all the figures in the leader's group will add 1d6 to their own results. And the leader die is rolled equal to the leader dice, does not qualify for the reaction test. So basically, if you're shouting orders at somebody while you're trying to do something, that leader die can add a +1 success bonus to all the other tests around it. It's a neat mechanic for showing that the leaders can actually do things to influence the groups and make them better. It's played during turns, and before the game begins, both sides choose D6 of different colors. You're basically going to be activating 2 different phases, 1 per side. Activation means that the active player can activate his groups, although games called encounters can last an unlimited number of turns. Each turn follows a strict sequence. Before the game begins, both sides choose a D6 of different colors. At the start of each turn before they're rolled, before both dice are rolled, this is called rolling the activation. If the dice scores equal are the same, like doubles, then either side activates and we roll the dice. If the dice are not doubles, read each dice individually. The higher score determines which side will activate its group first. In some cases, basically instead of activating groups, there might be PEFs. Only groups led by a leader with a rep equal to or higher than this activation dice can be activated. So the idea here is that you need to, when you roll to see what's being activated for the turn, the higher skilled people will go before the lower skilled people. It's a little bit like a variation of the chits in a bag bolt action method for seeing who activates during a turn, except you're randomly rolling the minimum skill level that can be activated until they've all gone. After the first group's completed all of its activations and any reactions may have caused and have been resolved, the active side will be allowed to proceed for the next group. After all the first side's groups have activated, the other side can activate 1 group at a time based on the result of its activation dice roll. This system will mean that many times lower rep groups will not be able to move. This reflects their lack of confidence and hesitancy. It also stresses the importance of putting high rep leaders with lower rep groups. So the idea here is, and this is a nice mechanic, every turn, you might have some people that just kind of cower and sit still because you've got inexperienced groups on the table. And I really like this mechanic. It means that the stars need to be placed in with the grunts to keep them motivated. And in movie terms, it kind of represents that terrified paralysis that you see in zombie movies where people are just freaking out, not doing anything. It's a really clever mechanic for activating. Multiple sides. There's many times when there's more than one human side in the game. These can be players and non-players, and here's how we do it. The players decide to play the game on opposite sides, or the players decide to decide during the game to play on opposite sides. Or a PEF is resolved as non-player characters, a weirdo shows up. When this occurs, we handle activation with the following changes. Each human faction has their own activation D6. Be sure to make it different color than what's already being used. Humans will activate in the order based on their individual D6 rolled. If any ties are rolled, simply roll off to determine the order of activation. And choose one of the human dice to be compared to the zombie dice for the purpose of rolling doubles. If doubles are rolled, the sides that rolled them will not activate this turn, but the non-doubling side will. An example, Billy Pink is a survivor using the blue D6. The Zeds are using a pink D6. During the game, Billy will run into a group of NPC gangers. A separate D6 is now added, being red. Next turn, I roll a 3d6 and get a blue 5, so that means the blue team 5 or less rank can go. Pink 3, or say 5 or higher rank can go. And pink 3 and red 2. So pink, it could be 3 or higher reps. The lower you roll on your activation dice, the more groups will be able to activate over the course of the turn. And that means Billy goes first, then the Zeds, and then finally the gangers. Now that you know the turn sequence, we'll explain during the rules in the order of the activations actually happen. So the actions of the can take, you can move up to your full distance, stay in place, changing the way it's facing, drop prone anytime during your move. And then you can also perform one of these actions: active fire if loaded with your weapon, pick up dropped weapons or items, and charge into melee before or after it's moved, as long as the total distance moved does not exceed its successful fast move. Normal movement's 8 inches. Fast movement is a faster move. Declare the intent to make a fast move. Roll one set of 2d6 for the whole group and compare each dice score individually to the rep of the figure. Do not roll the leader dice. If a figure has the fast attribute, roll additional odd-colored dice and place it in the results. For each d6 pass, the figure is allowed to add half its normal movement in inches to its normal movement. So basically, that 2d6, you could go 16 inches, or you could go 12 inches if you pass one, or you just go 8 inches with fast movements. The idea is like, how quickly do you traverse obstacles, and like, what's your runaway speed there? Fast movement may be attempted regardless of how close the enemy is, and at any time during the turn, even if it qualifies for a charge in a melee test. If attempted after the figure is partially moved, add the additional fast move distance to the remaining move distance. Rules for going prone, carrying on. That's like your like a normal state, basically, not wounded. And then charging into melee and ducking back are additional actions, and running away, you can just immediately book and leave the table. Rules for being in line of sight. And then, can you see something? So basically, if you are in a scenario where you're trying to hide, you can see if triggering groups can see you or not. You make insight tests for people to spot you and potentially shoot you. And then if you are in a sight test, people can now act. Each figure in the group that scored the most successes consults the insight resolution table. What actions the figure will take depends on if it's a grunt or a star. All the figures that will fire now declare their targets, and after actions are taken by all figures in the winning group, the opposing side will take any extra reaction test. So basically, that's how you resolve like an Overwatch if someone runs in the line of sight of you. So the game has a fairly complex system of like, if you can see me doing something, can I stay in line of fire or not? And then the reaction system basically is the heart of 2-hour war games. Make insight tests for when things activate in your fight, receive fire, go man down, then potentially charge into melee afterwards with anybody who didn't die from moving into line of sight. And then those are your statuses. So received fire. When a figure receives fire, it'll take the received fire reaction test. More than one figure firing at the same target will cause only one received fire test. Man down. Each time a figure sees a friendly figure go within 4 out of the fight or obviously dead, it must make a man down test. And then you make multiple tests. If there's times when a figure qualifies for both reaction tests, in that case, the one set of d6s are rolled for the figure and it's applied to both tests. Here are the results from best to worst: carry on, fire, charge into melee, duck back, or run away. This is basically the psychology of what happens when someone shoots at you or you see somebody get killed. So like if someone does that to you, you might, and that's kind of the heart of this game. You don't really know what your figures are going to do when they get acted upon, and only the star can choose. So that like the star has agency rule at the very beginning there is really important, because the rest of the figures, the grunts in your group and the additional stars, they're going to do this stuff. So they might either just like be in good order and be under control, but they also might decide to just run into melee with somebody, or duck back behind line of fire, or just be dead, or hide and like go out of line of sight. And their reactions will be kind of like the meat and potatoes of the game, where it's like, that's the fun of determining what's going to happen. And we have ranged combat. There's 2 ways to inflict damage in all things zombie. The first is with ranged weapons, the second's in hand-to-hand. All ranged weapons have a type, and in some cases, they've been lumped together in a broader category. So like an assault rifle can shoot to 48 inches on a 36-inch table, targets of 1 or 3, and an impact of 3. A BA pistol, a big-ass pistol, 12-inch range, a target of 1 or 2, and an impact of 2. So you're making your rep test, and you're going under 1 or 2, you're going to hit. Machine pistols, shotguns, and the shotgun has special rules for firing close range. Squad automatic weapons, submachine guns, And then the target number, the maximum number of shots or d6 is rolled when the weapon is fired by the figure. Each d6 is the potential to do damage to a target, and any or all dice may be applied to one or more of the figures. Target ratings also design the arc of fire, the swath of the weapon. Impact is the lethality, and then the arc of fire is where it can shoot, if it has one. And then sometimes you can fire two weapons at once if they're one-handed. Tight ammo. Ammo in all things zombie fade to black is pretty much unlimited. However, there's still a chance the weapon may temporarily run out of ammo before it's reloaded. Here's how we do it. Anytime one or more ones is rolled when firing a weapon, it's out of ammo and can't be fired again until reloaded. It takes one turn of activation to reload a weapon. Figures reloading weapons may move, but they can't exceed their normal movements. They can't go fast. And then grunts will always reload. And then you can also make fun weapons of your own and decide what the rules would be. So, like, the game doesn't care. It's not trying to be balanced point value-wise because it's a cooperative game. So it's like, you want to make a crossbow or a bolt-action rifle? Go for it. Give it some cool rules. Shooting rules. Line of sight. To shoot something, you must be able to see it and be in line of sight. Then you resolve your fire. Fire continues between figures until only one's able to return fire. This happens for the following reasons. You run out of ammo, you duck back, you run away, or you've been hit. So you literally don't stop. Like, a test to shoot at somebody ends when somebody can't shoot back anymore because they've ducked or they've stopped shooting. It's common for figures to fire multiple times in one turn, both when active and in reaction. And then allocating fire. When shooting, the player must designate who will fire at. Here's how we do it. A figure may fire at up to one target for each point of the weapon's target rating. Staying within its arc of fire, the shooter declares who are the targets. Both firing and shooter declares how many shots will go into each target. It's possible for one target to have more than one shot on it. So if you can shoot 4 times, you can shoot 3 into one into another. Roll the dice and arrange the dice from highest to lowest. Apply the dice to the target number as stated prior to the shooting with the highest d6 at the first. So Carlos fires his AR at Dez and Char. He declares to fire 1d6 at the first, Dez, and the rest at Char. He rolls a 5, a 1, and a 2. The 5s are lit from highest to lowest, 5, 2, 1. The 5 applied to Dez, which is the first target, and the rest applied to Char. So the 5 would fail probably if his rep was, like, let's say 4, and the 1 or 2 would then hit. So that's why you have to actually lay out, you decide who you're going to shoot at, so let's say 2 and 1. And who's going to be shot at first. And then because it's applied highest to lowest, the miss is more likely to go into the first target, not into the second. And resolving damage, once it's been scored, you must see if any damage was inflicted. Consult the ranged combat damage table. Roll a d6 versus the impact of the weapon. If a 1 scored, you're dead. If it's equal to or lower, then it's out of the fight. If the target scores higher than the impact, it will duck back. And note that zombie damage will be different because you got to shoot them in the head. So basically, a 1's always going to kill somebody if you hit them, and you're trying to roll equal to or under the impact rating. So a downed result is obviously also good. Anything else just makes them duck out of the way, and then the shooting sequence typically ends. There's types of damage in all things zombie. They are in order from most likely to least. -1 rep. This is the temporary loss of rep due to losing a melee. After all melees are over, the temporary rep is recovered. Out of the fight, you're knocked out, obviously dead. The figure's taken damage so severe that its head is exploded. It's obviously dead. And then you can also shoot at just extra things like shooting at people that are carrying wounded bodies. You can kill people when you capture them. And a pitiful shot. Rep 2 and Rep 3 characters are allowed to use the pitiful shot rule. Here's how we do it. The character shoots his weapon and rolls a 6. If he cannot hit the target, he's allowed to roll another d6. If he scores his rep or less, he's hit the target. Any other score is still a miss, and the target must make a reaction fire test. Basically, you're such a terrible shot, we give you bonus chances to actually hit something. Rules for melee, they're pretty similar to the rules for shooting, although they keep fighting basically until somebody's out. And rep is the declining rep is basically how you take damage over the course of melee fights. Rules for terrain features, hills, roads, woods. And rules for zombies. All right, so defining zombies. There's a few things you have to define about a zombie. What is its reputation? Does it have attributes? And what type of weapons does it have? All zombies are rep 3. Zombies have unique attributes called zombie frenzy. Zombies that have line of sight to a human will count zombie frenzy. Zombies with zombie frenzy count as rep 4 for activation only. So for rolling the activation dice, it means that they see you, they lunge towards you. And then they'll always move towards the nearest human. And once line of sight no longer applies, they go back to rep 3 for activation purposes. So basically, it's like, it's a bit like County Road Zero. Are they active or passive? The passive ones have no line of sight, and they activate at a lower rate. The higher ones are higher activation. Sometimes when I played this game, we would reduce the lower rep to 2. We'd make them rep 2 for activation when they can't see somebody and double it to rep 4. It just means it's a little bit more like the County Road Z where they just kind of stand there and idle and don't activate when they can't see you. But as soon as they see you, they like burst into action. Zombies don't use weapons, but they will zombie swarm. And they generate zombies. Zombies generate in 3 different ways. When the game starts, during the game when they are attracted by gunfire, and during the game where they can be found in buildings from defining moments when we get into the charts. Some general rules for like tracking the gunfire and placing. This is all pretty common stuff. Zombie surprises when they leap out of buildings. How they group up and group activate, because they turn to groups just like the character models do. And then all of the definitions of like how they move and operate around with their AI. Fighting a zombie swarm, obviously harder than fighting a regular melee. And then campaign rules. So the timeline is days 1 to 10, when the government's still around, group 11 to 20 when you're barricaded up, and group 21 to 30 where the military is called in and maybe all rule of law is gone. And then after that, the U.S. government unleashes the Lazarus Project to reclaim the country. Project fails with dire consequences. It's the end of the world as we know it. Thing goes wrong. Your role in the campaign is to stay alive, recruit and lead your band to get new items and survive. Manage yourself and your grunts by keeping track of your rep and then keep them alive too. And then you write through your character journal to do this. You build a home. So let's explain the campaign turn sequence. Declare if you're at home. Next type, what type of area you'll be in. Burn 1 food item. Have from 1 to 3 voluntary encounters. Roll for an involuntary encounter to see if it happens. And then check to see if anyone in your band increases or decreases their rep. And the idea here is that each campaign turn, each campaign game is the first, to play the campaign over the first year, the campaign time is going to be a certain number of days. For simplicity's sake, we'll track time in the campaign for the month. Players will have 1 encounter per week in the first 30 days. So the first 30 days is up to 4 games, right? 3 voluntary and 1 potentially involuntary game. You get area rules for like where you're taking place in, what kind of year it is. Right, so you're in an urban area, suburban area, or you're rural, and certain rules for encounters and items and stuff in that area. Searching and looting buildings. And then PEFs. It stands for possible enemy force. These are the baddies that might show up. PEFs, we use the PFs to limit the intelligence the player has during the game. By using PFs, we create an uncertainty as to who's going to show up, the size of the force, and like what they're armed with. So it's raiders, basically, and there's rules for their movement and activation. They typically will be using that line of sight rule where they overwatch you and stuff. And what are they? Are they law and order? Are they evil citizens, gangers, or survivors? And might they arrest you if they're the whatchamacallit, the law? And talking yourself out of it. And then we've got the day parts. Encounters are broken into different types of day. It could be morning, daytime, evening, or night. We got certain rules for like visibility and stuff. It happens in certain times of the day. And then voluntary encounters. There are certain voluntary encounters. You can be chilling, raids and rescues, robberies, searches, and takebacks. And then involuntary encounters, you can be burglarized, have a confrontation, have to defend your home, or be robbed. And each of them will have, defined encounters basically for playing through them. And I like that. I like the fact that you've got all these different like special encounters, basically. They've all got their own special rules. And that's it. All things zombie. So yeah, I really enjoy this. I think the idea if every 4 games is a month, then, and it's usually 3 games with a potential involuntary one, that means that you 12 times 3, 36 games-ish to do a full year in the zombie apocalypse. It's a nice 2-hour war games, like, classic miniature game. It's rules light, although I will say the rules are written in kind of a slightly archaic way where the wording can get overly top wordy. There's a ton of expansions for it as well with different settings, different themes, different places you can go, and additional rules for like forces and encounters and stuff like that. 2-hour war games love charts. So this is a very chart heavy game and you get tons of options for additional sort of like layers on top of it. So let's check in with the chat. We'll do a quick plug for last days at the end and then we are done. Gizmo Math Boys here. Welcome. Ashcron X is here too. And then Kevin Mitchell says, I think we should have gone with a quarter of a D12 to simplify things. Yeah, the D3 thing it drives me crazy. Half a D6 as opposed to just saying D3. It feels like, I don't know, special for the sake of being special. 15% of a D20, Astragon says. Matt says, you can be Simon Pegg and Nick Frost and go buy an ice cream. True. Jason Dan says, Garbage Time should be the name of Ash's circle of affiliates. It's true, the Trashmen. I mean, the Trashmen were a fantastic 1950s band that did Surfing Bird, a song of a certain ornithological nature, parodied in Family Guy. And then Kev says, interesting rules, but would take a few games to settle into them. They're not as difficult as the wordiness of the book kind of leads them to be. If you just read those stop sections almost entirely and don't read the rest of it unless you require more explanation, you can get through this really quickly. And then says, but then evidence suggests I may not be the sharpest at reading books. Yeah, then that's it. So we'll do a quick plug then for this guy right here. If you haven't seen it, it's a game I wrote in, I think it came out, 2018? It's been a while now. God, it's going to be 10 years ago soon. Jesus, that's a long time ago. I wrote this in 2009, actually. And if you want a dissertation on what the thought process behind Last Days is, it's basically me going and watching hundreds of zombie movies, trying to find out what the commonality of them is, the sort of common DNA. This is the core book, which is available on DriveThruRPG. You can get physical copies from Barnes & Noble, Chapters Indigo in Canada, W.H. Smith in the UK. It's still well in print and hardcover, lovingly illustrated, and produced by Osprey Games. There's an expansion, which adds, it's called Seasons. It adds basically a year in the life, additional mechanics for hunger, sickness, and managing sort of the more nitty gritty of your refuge. And yeah, and it's done. I've thought about doing an omnibus edition. Maybe I will at some point, but I mean, it was a bucket list thing. It's one of my favorite things I've written, and we've got tons of games of it here on the channel. So do you want to check out another alternative? The patrons will get mad if I don't mention it. So there it is. And we're done. So we've done another Indie Hour, guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you are a patron, you're seeing this live. If you are not on Patreon, you can check it out you'll check it out the week after on YouTube. But we will be all lovingly sat together doing the next patron pit for the Indie Hour, which you can get in on, watch live, get your input on, and of course do Q&As before and after. Thanks for Jordan hanging out in the chat, and for you guys for watching. Thanks, I'm Ash.